Being Human with Algorithms today with Raimund Seidel, director of the Schloss Dagstuhl Leibniz Center for Informatics. Schloss Dagstuhl, I have the pleasure that I know this place already from being there 2 times. It's always a very nice place for all kinds of different seminars that are ongoing there, and therefore you're also the perfect interviewee today for talking with me about this digital transformation and its effects. So as maybe not everybody in the audience had the pleasure yet to being in Dagstuhl, and some may not know you yet, could you briefly introduce yourself?
Okay, on the one hand, as you said, I am director of Schloss Dagstuhl, which is a informatics meeting place somewhere hidden in northern Saarland, close to the French border, and every week 2 groups of 30 to 40 people go there to discuss some topic in computer science, possibly related to something else or to something outside of computer science. But this is just a part-time job that I have, and my main job is being a professor of computer science at Saarland University, and I specialize on algorithms. So I've worked on algorithms for something like almost 40 years.
Perfect. That's perfect. Being human with algorithms is some term that we use to describe that for many years we have an ongoing digital transformation, and that affects all aspects of society. And when you think about this digital transformation, so what comes to your mind? So which are the most apparent effects of this digital transformation that you perceive?
So somewhat tongue-in-cheek, the most apparent effect is that I worked on algorithms for a long time, and most people didn't know what an algorithm was. And now algorithm is a bad word. It has a bad name because algorithms supposedly decide all kinds of things that they shouldn't decide, or they make bad decisions or whatever. So this is kind of one effect of this digital transformation. So my subject has become something that's suspect.
Negatively prejudiced somehow. Yeah, this is an interesting aspect, because when we started shaping the topic, this was also something that came up early in the discussion already, that this term algorithm, even though it's normally it's like a neutral thing, started to become something negative, mainly in the media and press. And so I was asking Stephen Cook this morning what his definition of an algorithm would be. So what would your definition of an algorithm be?
Well, just a recipe, a set of rules for doing something.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. And when you think now, for instance, like in Schloss Dagstuhl or in your professorship, so how would you say are you shaping this digital transformation?
Okay, I've worked on algorithms. Some of them may play some little role somewhere in working on data, and certainly many of the seminars in Dagstuhl have some more direct influence on this transformation. But if you ask me, then somehow, algorithms are part of it. But the real revolution is just this immense amount of data that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And of course algorithms help to organize those data and try to retrieve things and so on, but the data is kind of the interesting thing and the problem, if you want.
Mm-hmm. And so so this is an interesting aspect, because when I talk to people about what is changing at the moment, I tend to tell them, so data collection with Facebook and Google is going on now for many years, so at least 5+ years. And so the data is there, it's very inexpensive to store it. And what is interesting to me is that now with this artificial intelligence, there seems to come up some tool that might enable, and already started enabling, the people processing the data to do something with the data. So get semantics out and to actually do data mining and then do profiling and so on. And to me, it's an interesting time, because now this is now the critical point, because I think that still at the moment the society would be able to define the borders of what society wants to happen with this data, and the societal dialogue is not really getting started, because it's also like a very complicated topic. And so do you have thoughts to the thing that I was just saying?
Do I have thoughts? I'm I'm worried about other things, about information and data.
Yeah.
That's more the information overflow that we experience, and this has some direct influence on how we perceive the world. I mean, this whole question of fake news, and what is news, what is real news, and what is fake. What kind of impression 200 years ago somebody could have said, well, okay, the king of France is, 200 years ago there was no king of France anymore. Maybe again, I don't remember, but so let's say 250 years we're on the safe side, and then somebody here would have said, oh, the king of France is really a bad person. Although he may have been a wonderful guy, I don't know, but they didn't get any information. And then, okay, at some point there were newspapers, and at least in theory, you could read foreign newspapers, so it would take a while until you get them, if at all. And nowadays you have everything at your fingertips. But everything, so this means whatever somebody puts somewhere on the internet or makes available somehow is at your fingertips, and somehow you have to select. And this whole question of fake news, I think, is going to become much, much worse. It will be very, very difficult to get any sort of notion what's really happening in the world. Even the question what is really happening is kind of strange. But somehow this digital image, or those digital images, and the world, the physical world out there, bringing them somehow into some concordance. I don't know how this is going to be done.
And so maybe digital image, or like digital persona. So every one of us also is a digital persona and has a digital footprint and representation in these online systems that are definitely part of this digital transformation. We were talking about teaching before as well, before we started the interview, and so to me, with that, like differentiating between what is true and what is not. So there, it's like I was the last generation that grew up without smartphones, and the internet was just coming, and we still had encyclopedias and looked things up in the book. And when I talk to younger people, it's totally normal to them what you were just describing, namely that they are, okay, there's someone telling something, and I just look it up, maybe in Wikipedia, which might be a relatively good source because it has some sort of peer reviewing, or just something is in the internet, and then how do I identify what is true or what is not true? So thinking towards the education of young people, do you see deficits? And like probably the answer will be yes, anticipating that, but do you have ideas what are things that are missing today that could be introduced there?
Oh, I think this is too vast a topic, and I've thought too little about this. And my kids have been out of school for 5 years, and actually a lot of stuff has changed in those 5 years. So I'm the wrong person to ask.
But would you say like your children are able to distinguish between the what is right or not, or not taking your children but taking other children there? Do you have the impression it's becoming more difficult, or they master it very well?
I think that at least they've taken the adage, if it looks too good to be true, then it probably is. I think they've taken this to their hearts and try to follow that. But beyond this, I don't know. I think still strange things could still happen with them.
And maybe staying a little bit with these fake news. So there was this Cambridge Analytica example, which
And this is not so much. This is not about fake news. I mean, this is about using data,
targeted
and
advertisements.
targeted advertisements. But I mean, if somebody claims actually, well, we are sitting here with the Heidelberg laureate for him, and so no, it actually didn't take place.
Yeah.
Uh,
And Donald Trump comes and says that.
It never took place. Well,
Yeah.
we could have made up all kinds of arguments, and it's all a big conspiracy.
Yeah.
And there are bound to be some people who believe that.
Yeah.
And well, so life is becoming difficult, or can become very difficult. And I think if enough interest and power is put behind something like this, you can kind of negate big things that.
Yeah. Did you follow this thing that Jan Böhmermann did with the Varoufakis gate, where they manipulated the imagery and then they put a finger for the finance minister of Greece? Did you follow that?
No, I didn't.
Okay, so because there it was like they put video footage on the internet, and it appeared to have been put there like 1 year ago, and then they said, okay, they investigated and they found out that there was this thing where he did where he showed like the middle finger, and it was not real, it was faked. And with the digital tools, they did it very well, so it looked real. And so to me, always it's an important effect of this digital transformation is that you can create material that is very immersive. So you see the video footage, for instance, and it's faked, and it's faked in such a good quality that 10 years ago only like people who having much money were able to do that.
Okay, so this is finally a place where algorithms really come into play.
Yeah.
Because without good algorithms you couldn't do it.
Yeah.
But I mean the other phenomenon is just, well, if you want to make a conspiracy, you have more tools nowadays than you used to.
Yeah. And the other example, if we started talking into that direction, so one of the Munich groups, so they are also active in this field, that you do this face manipulation, so that you can talk and they record it with a camera and they can put it on Donald Trump's face, for instance, and then he's doing Donald Trump movements that mimic what you do. And so this is also a very strong technique, because it allows you to bring almost all of the sensations that it would take in order to believe this imagery. It's an interesting aspect.
So I'm more worried about this abuse of algorithms for this than algorithms maybe left too much at their own devices, so to speak. But I see other problems, and not so much some learning algorithms doing strange decisions.
And when you think, as you're also as Dagstuhl in the scientific committee, you're probably also discussing streams that you see there and directions. So do you see a need for more ethics awareness for computer scientists, going into the direction that the computer scientists are implementing the algorithms, and they might have the standpoint like, okay, we're just implementing it, other ones are applying it, and so it's their duty to take care of what they do. The other standpoint would be to say, okay, if I implement an algorithm, I have to anticipate the societal impact already, at least to a certain extent, and I have to technically follow some codes of ethics, maybe to call it like that, when I implement that, and I just don't do certain things as a profession. Do you have an opinion into that direction?
I think we all have to think more about ethics I think the argument that you made, that while things are being generated, produced, thought up, that ethical issues should be considered, I think this is very, very difficult, because this requires kind of a following through all possible uses, all thoughts, and just in terms of complexity and the amount of work you would have to put into this, it's not possible. So the problem is really somewhere else, and recently I thought a little bit about this, but this is maybe extremely naive, that mean, ethics is maybe just some sort of huge many-person game, but not something where you can really prescribe something. And so you try to figure out something that everybody can live with. And you can go back to content. Yeah, that's something everybody can live with. But I mean, that's just a wild guess.
And so I also agree to that. So I also see that the society has to make the rules that the society wants to live in. And related to that, another question that I was also, or you can also say something to it.
Well, I think the society it's too abstract.
It's like someone has to do.
So someone has to make rules, but if people abide by the rules is a different question yet.
Yeah, and do we need different politicians for that? So the question goes into the direction that. So to me, the current government is probably the last one that is not digitally native in the sense of that for them they are. So Angela Merkel seems to rarely use her smartphone the way like a maybe today 18-year-old or an HLF participant here is using the smartphone, but more like okay, I can do email and maybe a little chat and everything. So do you think there will be a huge change in the government as well if this digitalization is also becoming reflected there?
I'm not sure it would turn to the better.
Okay.
If I look at the foreign student at my university, with many of them, I have the impression they never really arrive.
Yeah.
Because they're on Facebook or WhatsApp or whatever and spend 2-3 hours a day with their friends in their home country.
Yeah. Okay.
And I feel really sorry for them because that somehow eats away time and they're trying to live two lives at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think if you're really busy and politicians are really busy, and I have to say the older I get, the more respect I get for the profession of a politician. Whether for politicians also maybe a different question, but for this whole profession in doing this, and I think just using smartphones and things like this, kind of like my kids do, would be an inappropriate time sink.
Yeah.
So, I don't think it's going. I mean, some will be able to use it a little bit more and so on, but I don't think this is going to make such a big difference.
Yeah, you were already mentioning it a little bit in that direction, so that it's also challenging today to live in this more digital world. And there, I think, into the direction that you have, as you also mentioned, you have many opportunities today, and you have to select which one to take, and you might have the feeling I don't want to lose an opportunity, and so you're not. So I have the impression that many people, including myself, for many activities, are not like really doing the activity and then finishing it and then going to the next one, but having 20 activities in parallel running. So is it something that when you think like 15 years back that changed?
Well, I guess 15 years ago there was still the story multitasking is a good thing, and people who are able to do so, they should do it, and they're at some advantage.
Yeah.
In the meantime, I have the impression this view has changed a little bit, maybe because it was carried to some extreme, in particular with smartphones and things like this. I think somehow, this may be a general trend that everything is becoming faster, and people are less inclined to kind of do some whatever project means some project really well and to total completion. But maybe this was wrong to do in the first place. So I don't know.
Yeah. What would you say is the biggest challenge of this digital transformation at the moment?
I think the biggest challenge in the long run is just going to be to make sense of this massive data and information that is flowing around.
Yeah.
This is really, and this can. I was thinking a little bit that maybe we aren't made for this. It's a little bit like. I don't know of any animal that has also a pair of eyes on the back of its head or on the back of its body.
Yeah.
And there must be some reason for this. And it could be that it's just not necessary, would be too much energy expended.
Yeah.
Or it could be that for some reason it's not possible to actually adequately deal with all the information that you get.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there's all this data, all this information around, and in Dagstuhl you can, there's this little iPad there where you get, I don't know, 1,000 newspapers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, they're not. Many of them are in English, German, French, Hindi, whatever.
Yeah.
But you know, there's all this stuff out there, and this is just newspapers, and they're God knows what.
Yeah.
You know, how do you tell what is good, what is bad, what is correct, what is incorrect, what is relevant, what is irrelevant?
And that brings us back to what we were talking about before. This filter bubbles. So saying you have information overload, and in order to cope with it, you need to pre-filter information, and someone has to do it, and maybe
there's a lot of potential for abuse.
Yeah, there's a potential for abuse, and also for, I mean, the other term that comes along with the filter bubbles is these echo chambers. So that the things that you want to hear, you hear them, and then there's so much information, you find a vast amount of people confirming your thoughts, which also might lead to extremist points of view and so on.
So which leads to the question whether for those interviews you'll be talking to somebody who is completely outside computer science, completely outside academia.
Yeah.
Have you planned this, or?
I have planned this, and I also started it with the people who were part of the symposium. So we have some interviews also with people who are outside both worlds. Yeah, but not that much yet. So it's a good point to also extend it more into that direction, because as I told you, it's also the good thing with the interview series is that everybody brings in their own point of view. And before, when I was talking to Stephen Cook, for instance, he said that he's using the smartphone mainly for email and for communication, like for face communication and also for voice communication, and he actively decided against using the modern communication forms. And so I think this is also something that is highly determining how everybody perceives this digital transformation, like in which parts are you participating and what are the things that you're doing there. So coming from the negative side to the positive side, so what would you personally say is the best thing that you perceive with this digital transformation? What is the best opportunity that comes?
Of course, there's all this. It's again the information that you have at your fingertips. I can, on the fly change my plans on the train because I don't know, some train was cancelled or whatever, and this all works. So I can plan a trip to Japan in no time, and this all goes. Or if I think of my youth, we had endless discussion and fights at the dinner table over various stupid facts. How far is it from here to there? Whether this route is closer than that one. And nowadays you just open up Wikipedia or Google Maps or whatever, and this would be resolved in no time. And I think this would have been very beneficial at the time. So now you can have other fights.
Indeed, it's about fights and social status then as well that you cannot define over that. And that brings us already to the last question: being human with algorithms. When you hear the slogan, what does it tell you? What do you feel with that?
I have to be human with many things. Algorithms is one of them. It's really bad pun, but anyway. So, I heard one colleague tell this joke. What is heaven on earth? And it's a professorship in Germany. What's hell on earth? Well, colleagues. So I have to be human with algorithms and also with colleagues, and also with myself. So.
Okay, very nice, Raimund. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.